right. So I think we'll go ahead and get started so that we can stay close to our schedule for the day today. Thank you all for being here. I met most of you last night, but for those who I haven't met yet, my name is Bill Maurer. I'm a professor of anthropology here at UC Irvine and also the dean of the School of Social Sciences here at UCI. So on behalf of the social sciences, let me welcome you as dean, and on behalf of director of IMTFI, let me welcome you as director of IMTFI. For those who haven't participated in an IMTFI conference before, you're in store for a very unique event. And just to kind of orient people who haven't been here before, as well as our new fellows who received research awards in this current year and are going to be presenting some of their work in progress, I wanted to give you a bit of a background on IMTFI and what we are and how we came about. This is a pretty unique institution. We were founded in 2008. And my friend and colleague Scott Mainwaring, who I'll introduce in a minute because he'll be chairing the first panel, was a partner in crime in sort of thinking up the idea for the Institute. And we're supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But when we got started in 2008, we had some ideas about what should be happening in the research space around the newly emerging mobile money phenomenon. Everybody was very excited about M-Pesa in Kenya. Everybody was very excited about the potential of the mobile phone for being a new channel for delivering banking and financial services and money transfer and small value storage and all of that. And there was a lot of activity and a push for a whole lot of investment. But we thought, you know, there's a few crucial reality checks that need to take place, and that there's really a lot of value to be gained by doing a couple things which really have become the hallmark of IMTFI. And the first is to support real in-depth, on-the-ground research on what people are actually doing, not just with their mobile phones and with mobile money, but money, and money in a very broad and expansive sense. What are people actually doing on the ground with all the things of value that they use as a store of value, as a means of exchange, and when they're transferring wealth to one another? So where a lot of people in the development community and certainly at the Gates Foundation and other philanthropic actors were sort of thinking about money. Money is the stuff in people's wallets. Money is cash. And we're interested in sort of getting cash onto a digital platform. We imagine that's going to have a lot of benefits for the poor and reduce the costs of cash for the poor. We sort of stopped and said, you know, is it really just cash? Because in a lot of the countries and communities in the world, cash is but one of a whole range of objects that people are using and relations that people are using to store value, to understand value, to transmit value, and to build new value with one another. So the first thing that we really tried to emphasize was this emphasis on real in-depth, qualitative often research in communities, really deeply embedded in communities for long periods of time, so you can get to the point where people will actually start telling you what they're really doing with their things of value and with their money, instead of just ticking off on a survey the answers that they expect you want to hear. So that was the first thing. The second thing is we thought that it would be really important to make sure that there were some other voices and other players, on the research side anyway, in this emerging phenomenon of trying to understand people's money and saving and storage and the impact of mobile and other digital technologies. We wanted to ensure that there were voices from the global south and from the developing world, and that we could find people and thereby help create a research network of people who were deeply invested in the countries where things like mobile money were being rolled out because they were their countries. And that meant that people had existing connections and relationships, connections to other stakeholders, to policymakers, and also just to aunts and uncles and grandmothers and grandsons and so on, who were using these things and who often, you know, provide the greatest insight into what the client side really looks like in the rollout of mobile money. So besides wanting to have this kind of reality check on the research side and do some qualitative work, do some in-depth work, we wanted to make sure we had people who were from the countries where these things were taking place doing the work. And then the third thing, and I have to say the third thing just kind of came about. We didn't really plan it in advance, but after the first year, we were like, wow, this amazing thing has happened. The third thing really was an emphasis on building and nurturing and sustaining a network. And that's what you all are part of now today. Surprise, you're part of a network. And you have all kinds of new friends that you don't even know about, many of whom are going to be watching this as it streams online today from, we got an email today from Mesfin in where is he, Ethiopia right now, who said, how do I log in and watch the thing? So he'll be watching. We have other people from, from Indonesia all the way to Argentina who are probably going to be watching. And we realized that one of the greatest values of IMTFI has turned out to be this network. The research results are terrific and wonderful and fascinating, but just having this kind of collection of human capital that we've brought together from very diverse places and perspectives, from 38 countries all over the world, from just about every discipline you can think of. So there are people from anthropology, psychology, policy and political science, law, IT, design, computer science, agricultural economics, mechanical engineering or something, right? It just sort of gets, I don't know if we have any chemists, but you get to the point where you're like, wow, how did we get all of these people, and what now new values are being realized by simply stitching together and keeping this network going? So that's a bit of the kind of unique experiment, so to speak, that IMTFI has become. As I said, we're now in our 5th year. This is the 5th conference we've held here at UC Irvine. You're joining a group of over 120 researchers from 38 countries, as I said. And the nice thing is that we're all in our own separate projects in our own different ways, and there's quite a range of projects and diversity of substantive foci here for the work that you're all doing. But we're all turning our minds together to a common set of questions. And the set of questions have to do most basically with what is going to be the impact of new mobile and digital channels for money and banking on the world's poor. And as we sort of go through the next couple of days, we'll get into very narrow discussions about certain kinds of things that certain groups are doing, maybe with gold or with cash, or the interface between mobile money and livestock, or the impact of the digital channel for transactions on inequality and on gender relationships and that sort of a thing. But at its widest angle, we're sort of asking this big question about what the technological transformation in money, as money goes digital, is going to mean for the bulk of the world's population. A whole set of other sort of small questions follow, and we've tried to break them out in the structure of the program for today and tomorrow as we've organized you into panels. And those questions are things like, what is the relationship between cash and cashlessness? How do we think about the dematerialization of the substance of money as it then, in a dematerialized form, starts to work together with all of the other forms of money and kinds of value that people are using, from gold to goats, as I always say? What are the kind of everyday practices that people are engaging with as they start to use some of these new forms of money and new channels for finance? And I think, when we started in 2008, well, I'm just going to say it. When we started in 2008, we kept it clean, right? We were like, we want to know about just financial inclusion. But as things kind of went on, and as people got more and more experience, as the researchers got more experience, as folks started opening up to them, because even if you're studying your own community, very often, you're in the role of the researcher, and people don't want to share all the things they're really doing with M-Pesa or whatever. As things went along, stuff got a little bit more risque. And we'll be hearing more about some of that, I think, at this conference. So our attention turned, as people's attention turned, to, what are some of the bad things that people do with this stuff? So, gambling, more gambling. Fraud, has become very interesting in the different ways in which fraud can take place. And I don't mean to sort of say, these new systems open the door to fraud, because they don't any more than cash, right? Cash itself is an inherently risky proposition. If I drop it and you pick it up, by law, it's yours, right? I don't have any claim on it anymore. So But I guess we became more and more interested in the rich diversity and the rich palette of practices on either side of a moral divide or on a kind of moral gradient from, pure to impure, or however you'd like to frame it. We also became more and more interested over time in some of the surprising findings, the things that nobody was looking for, the things that from the industry perspective were invisible because industry wasn't really deeply embedded in the communities all the time or was conducting marketing surveys where people tick the expected answer, things that were invisible from the development community because of the development community's sort of laser focus on poverty alleviation and this sort of a thing. And there have been wonderful moments throughout the IMTFI conferences over the years where we're sort of going along in our conversation and out will pop something weird, right? And then the conversation just goes crazy. And I remember last year there was a point where someone just sort of offered, the whole school fees thing is often just a lot of nonsense, and people are using things like M-Pesa not to pay school fees, but for things like, various religious rituals or circumcision rites or that sort of a thing. And everybody started talking and offering, oh yeah, I have this story, or I remember this time I was here and this happened, or I had an informant who told me that, and so on. This is really, the virtue of the network, the virtue of the interdisciplinarity of this group. This is one of the few places, probably in the world where you're going to get anthropologists and economists, for instance, actually talking to one another, and hopefully not like getting into blows. You can take it outside if you have to go fight, but and also one of the few places where you're going to have people from such a diversity of perspectives all turning our minds to this phenomenon. So with that, I'm very much looking forward to the next couple of days. Again, I want to welcome you. A couple notes on the format. So just for those of you who are not IMTFI researchers but are visiting and listening in, the way that we operate here is we bring people to UC Irvine sort of at the midway point. Now, I know some of you are almost finished, some of you are just getting started, but let's pretend it's the midway point, okay? We bring people to the midway point to deliver their work in progress. And the idea that we had originally was, gosh, it would really stink if we funded all these people and then brought them out in a year to give their results, and the results were kind of like bad or like kind of poor quality or whatever. Not that anybody would have that problem, but we thought that would kind of be awful. So instead, why don't we bring them all out in the middle, have them all meet each other, hear where they're at, hear how they're thinking, and let people start to talk to one another, offer their own course corrections, some hints on methods, some ideas about theory. And also see what sorts of new connections and collaborations emerge. And that's one thing that's happened at every IMTFI conference. People meet and then get ideas and then go off on their own and do a whole new project, right, which is fantastic. So bear in mind, as you're going through the couple of days today, these are works in progress. So I hope everyone can sort of offer a kind of generosity in their listening and in their commenting and be constructive and helpful and all of that along the way. Another note where we've asked people to keep to about 15 minutes. Our discussants will time keep and we'll cut you off firmly at 20, so have that in mind as you're going along. We've tried to build in ample time for breaks and for informal discussion. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful day, so feel free to wander around outside, but please don't get lost and please come back. The lunch is going to be in here, so you won't have to move very far. And the other bit of housekeeping is the restrooms. You sort of go out that way and either around the hall that's right here outside, or you can go out back that way toward the back, and there's another set, and there are signs to direct you to the restrooms, all right? With that, let me invite Scott Mainwaring to come up, and also the folks who were on the very first panel. And Scott, as I mentioned, was with me at the birth of IMTFI and is a dear colleague and friend. He has over 20 years of experience working in industry research labs, first at Interval and then at Intel. And here at UC Irvine, he helped co-found the Intel Science and Technology Center in Social Computing, which I co-direct. He's a psychologist by training and someone who has been thinking deeply about money and transactions for in a professional context for like 15 years. So with that, Scott, I'll turn it over to you.